Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, it's time for the gifts of Fangames. Although I'm sure plenty of you probably are aware of Popgoes as an IP, I don't ever really hear people talk about the original 2016 release, which, for the record, is one of the only Popgoes projects to actually ever come out. Trust me, this series has cancelled entries everywhere. Although nowadays it's outdated due to all the characters having redesigns in Popgoes Evergreen, the game itself has never been a slouch, at least to me. So before we get into gameplay, I should mention story. Similarly to Five Nights at Candy's, Popgoes goes off of the original FNaF story, as if it were a spin-off or side chapter. In fact, Popgoes and Candies, according to series creators Kane Carter and Emil Mako respectively, take place in the same universe. This has led to other statements that I won't get into, but will be putting on screen because they are funny. Anyway, in this story, Jeremy Fitzgerald, the night guard from FNaF 2, now known as Fritz Glade, has started his own restaurant years after his tragic story. In it, Toy Bonnie is the culprit of the bite of 87, and he's the victim. And his daughter, also named Bonnie, was killed and has become Black Rabbit. In the modern day, Popgoes and Gang are animatronics that have been 3D printed onto endoskeletons, with the main draw of the restaurant being to have kids make their own toys and parts using the same 3D printers. While I think 3D printers is kind of a cop-out, not gonna lie, it does actually tie into gameplay in a meaningful way, which I'll get to. As a night guard, your task is to watch over the building after hours, and you're not alone. I don't just mean the animatronics either. Apparently your boss is sitting across the hall from you in his office. The threats you'll be up against include Popgoes the Weasel, Sarah and Saffron the Squirrels, Blake the Badger, and Stone the Crow. And everything is very British. I even asked King Carter during The Baddest stream if Popgoes would speak in a British accent. His answer? Yes. Side note, if I were to ever do interviews on this channel, Kane Carter and Emil Mako would probably be at the top of my list. Just saying. If you're watching this, Kane, knock on wood. The gameplay of Popgoes is elaborate and requires a degree of explanation. As a night guard, you have a camera system that you control through a cell phone. You use the cell phone for a couple different options, including turning on the ventilation and shutting down the power in a room. During gameplay, as stress and tension rises, your panic meter in the bottom left increases. When you reach maximum panic, you lose, as whatever animatronic acted last will be the one to kill you. You can decrease panic by looking outside the window to your right, but don't look too long, as Stone the Crow will turn his head and scare you, increasing your panic by a lot. The main way your panic will increase is by an animatronic getting too close for comfort. Popgoes is the most active character, as he'll enter the room in the center and choose a room to go into. When he's in there, he'll use a 3D printer to print a piece of Black Rabbit. If he assembles Black Rabbit fully, you lose. You have to shut down the rooms with the 3D printers when Popgoes enters them, as this will prevent him from using them. While you do that, also watch the ventilation around the building, as Sarah and Saffron crawl through them. If they reach you, they don't kill you, but they steal your phone. Without the ability to switch cameras or shut down rooms, your panic will increase dramatically. The way to stop these two is by making sure whatever vent they're in is turned on, as they can't move when it's too hot. Blake is actually somewhat similar. After activating, Blake will begin to make his way to the server room, where he can sever the internet connection and prevent you from using your phone. The way to stop him is to check the screen for a color to be displayed. All you have to do now is press one of the multicolored buttons in front of you to lure him away from the server and walk to you. When Blake gets bored, he'll try to get into the server room again. These four mechanics end up blending into a total chaotic mess. You're going to constantly find yourself falling behind on one animatronic or several, which is why I think it's a good thing you're actually given some leeway with Popgoes, who's always the most immediate threat. Occasionally during gameplay, you'll get some Easter eggs featuring the toy animatronics, Stone, or this freaky robot thing, who I later found out was named Simon. Who is Simon? I'm still not exactly sure. The Popgoes lore is deep, much deeper than most other fan games. In this original series, although Simon is our stand-in for the purple guy, Springtrap still exists, so there's technically two versions of the killer running around, one posthumous, and the other being a robotic recreation. Actually, I'll mention it here because I don't know when else I'll have the chance, but in one of this game's many cancelled sequels, there was going to be voice acting. As I recall, Kellen Goff, who's voiced various FNAF characters, including Funtime and Glamrock Freddy, he was going to be voicing Simon. Somehow, Kane was able to get an actual FNAF VA to come help him with a fan game before the fanverse even existed, and that's just not going to ever actually be in a game. What a shame. After beating Night 6, which although more challenging than other nights still really only took me 2 attempts, I found myself presented with a number of options. These included a custom night, some extras, and the credits. And this is honestly where Popgoes goes from being a B+ fan game to a straight A. The custom night is simple, with some challenges that reward you with different metal renders of the characters, not too much to do there, although it's worth noting that while each of the normal nights are numbered, first night, second night, etc., this one is called Good Night, just a fun touch. In the characters profiles menu, we see some renders of all the animatronics and their little descriptions, with Stone being the most ominous, the implication being that your character is somehow hallucinating him whenever he appears in front of the camera. This is kind of impossible, but we'll talk why in a bit. Looking through development, we see each character in their earliest stages, whether it be concept art or 3D model. If anything, it's kinda cool to see just how far Popgoes himself and the squirrels have come along. While the squirrels still do just kinda look like Sandy from SpongeBob to me, Popgoes went from kinda looking like a bear to a much more clear European Weasel inspiration. We also have scrapped content. You could write an absolute book out of some of this stuff, and I do mean literally. Apparently, there was a scrapped graphic novel turned scrapped book turned, well, just put it in the game. The plastic grave, from what I can tell, would probably have been about the scrapping of the toy animatronics, and explain why they sometimes make appearances in the game. I had Toy Chica a couple times myself. I kinda want to see this brought back in some way, as it's clear Kane Carter and the Popgoes team had a lot to say. And then we have Morse the Mole, and the first time I saw him, my computer crashed and restarted. Then there's the minigame map, which lays out the map for the in-between night minigames. What do you know, it's a brain. Whose brain? The players? Well, we'll talk about that now, won't we? I honestly don't know whose brain this is actually supposed to be. My first thought was Fritz Glade, but he's the Bite of 87 victim. He'd have some parts missing. The last part of this extras menu I want to talk about before we talk about secret stuff is the credits. Although simple, it's just a neat feature and a fun time capsule. Kane Carter at age 18, Viznam at age 17, already by then the two had become established figures in their community. Emil Mako is credited with loaning some spare models to Kane for the game, and in the sweetest thing I've ever read in a fan game, Lewis Dawkins, or Daco Games, as well as DA Games, donated collectively over $1,000 towards Kane's vet bill to save his cat from a dangerous lesion. This story has its own menu and everything. It's just very nice, and kind of explained to me why Kane considers Daco his favorite FNAF YouTuber. All in all, this credits menu just feels like the after party to a big production, everyone shaking hands and the big names up top talking about how honored they felt to be a part of it all. And when I say it all, I mean it's time for me to finally talk about what's hidden behind those challenges. No, I didn't do them myself. I value my sanity more than I value the funny Weasel man. So, there's Simon. Yep, how do I describe him? He's like Glitchtrap, kind of. Simon is a robot recreation of the character Simon Fitzgerald, who in the Popgoes universe is the purple guy and thus Springtrap. Simon, being a recreation of that guy, is kind of a psychopath. Fritz Glade, Simon Fitzgerald's brother, had created the robot Simon and chained him to the wall out of fear of what he created. In the grave ending of Popgoes, Simon has Black Rabbit kill Fritz, and in the cancelled Dead Forest sequel, he becomes the owner of the restaurant, I guess. Black Rabbit isn't a secret character, but much of their backstory is a secret, so I'll mention that now. Fritz Glade was the bite victim and became traumatized after the fact. After attending therapy for much of his life afterwards, he decided to confront his trauma head-on and name his daughter Bonnie Glade. However, one day wherein his daughter was wearing a mask depicting Toy Bonnie, Fritz broke down and killed her with an axe. Ashamed and repentant, Fritz buried her under a fountain in his backyard and created the Black Rabbit parts for her to possess. After Simon fully prints her out, she kills Fritz in a rage, and honestly, this part makes sense. According to Gemstone, and trust me, we'll get to him, Black Rabbit is the only character who can actually kill the player. Gemstone and Gravestone are both variants of Stone the Crow, and their main objective is to send different messages to the player. Gemstone carries a sign that says "Find the Truth," and Gravestone carries a sign reading out the death of Jeremy Fitzgerald, otherwise known as Fritz Glade. They don't have any story significance and are kinda just there. The next secret character is Sex Strings. They are a multi-armed robot with thin digits, and oh yeah, you play as them the whole game. Yeah, Strings originates as a kind of safety bot made for Fritz, as he was having nightmares of the puppet, and originally had Strings made as a way to fend them off. I should mention that Strings itself was originally a sort of religious ornament, but Fritz made the robot version later on. In-game, it seems that Strings' purpose is to prevent Popgoes from creating Black Rabbit, which is why getting attacked by any animatronic is a game over. It allows Popgoes to make Black Rabbit unchecked. Strings actually has two distinct designs, one made by Reddit user PandaCry, this is the ornament version, and the robot Sex Strings, which is actually made by FNaF. Despite being so important to the plot, whenever people bring Strings up, it's usually just because, oh my god, you play as a robot the whole time, that's so wacky, when really it has much more to do with how Fritz Glade as a character is incredibly lonely and tortured after everything he's done in his life. Then again, this is all based on the 2016 Popgoes, and while Popgoes Evergreen hasn't changed too much with the story from what we can tell, we know it's a reboot, so this is all subject to change. Oh, and I guess the Lux animatronics exist too, mostly just to replace Simon after you get the grave ending, so they're not important. The last two hidden characters in this game I do not believe are considered canon, but I might as well talk about them. The Dako animatronic appears if you turn on the television set on camera 9, he says a YouTuber thing and disappears. This was mostly just a fun Easter egg kind of thing. Like I said, Kane's relationship with Dako is pretty tight. The last secret character you can find in Popgoes 2016 comes from the custom night menu. By inputting 2124 into the menu, you are greeted with Cyanide, a cyan version of Golden Freddy. This is actually in reference to the subreddit r/2124, which as far as I can tell was a private subreddit where the Popgoes team was first formed. Cyanide was the group's collective mascot at the time. It seems like the subreddit was initially made for people to talk about the more mature side of FNAF, which is probably why Popgoes' story in general is really dark for a game where only one animatronic can actually kill you. So that's pretty cool. And with that, it's all done. Popgoes 2016 is a bit primitive nowadays, but in 2016 I'd consider it a masterpiece, at least by Fangame standards, especially given how young all the developers were at the time. Kane Carter, of course, went on to make the Popgoes name the largest name in association with the fanverse. FNaF is currently working on his own remake of the original Five Nights at Freddy's, and the rest of the team has for the most part gone on to work on other fan games. Voice actors, modelers, animators, texture designers. Even though I didn't play Popgoes when it came out, I still have this feeling of nostalgia over it that I just can't shake. That's about it out of me today. I just really think that Popgoes 2016 is one of the most exciting fan games I've ever played, and it's a shame that more people aren't that into it. So if this video made you at all interested in it, please go check it out on GameJolt, link in the description. That's all out of me today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video around. Peace.